Hi and welcome. My name is Sam Laika Shukur. I'm a design architect and a certified passive house designer at ISD Architects. Today I'd like to share with you the 4 critical reasons why I think building a passive house is the way to go in 2022. So whether you are building a new home, you're retrofitting, you're renovating, you're expanding, or building maybe a low to mid-rise housing project, you need to seriously consider passive house. But before I dive into the 4 reasons why passive house wins in 2022, let me give you first a bit of information about the role of buildings in creating or in adding to the dilemma of global warming or hurting the environment. There are actually 3 facts that I would very briefly talk about. Buildings are a significant source of energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And this information was extracted from Natural Resources Canada. The fact number 2, which says that 67% of energy use in households, and I'm talking about residential now, goes to space heating and cooling. 60 to 70% of all energy that we talked about here is actually goes to space heating and a lesser degree to cooling. The fact number 3, which is related much to the 60-70% fact, which is that this trend of energy consumption is rising. This bar represents the natural gas consumption in 1990, and this bar represents the gas consumption in 2013. And there are no indications that in 2022 this will be flat or decline, but actually this is a trend over 20 years. So that trend, without doing something really dramatic and drastic, this trend will keep getting worse. Now let's move on to the 4 critical reasons why we should consider passive house building in 2022. I will start with health. And many people would start with super efficiency, but I put it at the 4th reason, not because I want to diminish its importance, to focus your attention to the impact of passive house on health of its residents or on the family, on children and elderly. The first and most important aspect why passive house is healthier than any other building standard is fresh air. Now, fresh air is essential, as you know, to human health and well-being. We spend 80 to 90% of our time indoors. After the pandemic in 2020, we started to spend 100% of our time indoors. We need a good balance also between temperatures across the space, whether the deeper space or the space close to the windows or between the floor and the ceiling. All of this temperature has to be part of the balance that only passive house can provide it. Now, most of the time we keep the windows shut. So I have a question here regarding operable windows, because some people say, okay, what's the big deal? We can open windows and get fresh air. But my question is the fact that we have windows to the outside guarantee the supply of fresh air? Maybe. Now, if you're in the middle of the city, if you are in an urban area versus you are facing a park or facing a valley or you're in the mountain, windows are not reliable in providing fresh air, and this is well documented fact because of the pollution, because of the noise, because of so many other aspects that create an air that is mostly more polluted than the indoor air. I will give you a simple example. When you're sitting in a bus full of passengers in the winter and you feel like you want to breathe fresh air because of all the respirations of the people inside the bus, and you want to get rid of the CO2 emissions that comes from our bodies, and then you open the window and then you realize that it's very cold and you start people yelling at you to close that window immediately. Windows are not a good source for providing fresh air. Here is a quotation that I got from Natural Resources Canada, and it's called Healthy Living. And it says that residential ventilation may occur naturally or mechanically. Occupants generally have little control over natural ventilation aside from opening and closing windows. Ventilation solely by window opening can lead to excessive energy costs, particularly due to the heat loss in the winter or loss of conditioned air in the summer. Window opening can also create challenges in managing relative humidity in the winter and summer. So this is the source from Natural Resources Canada, NRC, and it's documented in a document that you can download. It's called Healthy Living Report. Now, the Passive House standard requires that the ventilation system mechanically provide 30 cubic meters per person of fresh air every single hour. 30 cubic meter per person every single hour in the building. This can be provided all year round by a mechanical ventilation system with a heat recovery, so there are really no uncomfortable cold drafts from the ventilation. Alternatively, it can be provided by natural ventilation in summer and mechanical ventilation with the recovery for the rest of the year. So you have an option in Passive House to open the window if the weather conditions allow and you're not losing heat. Otherwise, it's a standard in Passive House to provide each person for every hour of 30 cubic meters of fresh air. So let me move on to the second reason so that I don't elongate the video. The second reason would be comfort, and the concept of comfort are related to temperature. In temperature, we can talk about two different things: the surface temperature and the cold spots. The comfort, as I said, can be divided into draft-free, minimum temperature differentials across space and between surfaces. Current ordinary houses and buildings are not designed to be draft-free. Architects don't pay attention to that. Just a tiny hole in the exterior wall or in the building envelope or in the ceiling, and you get cold drafts, and you keep asking, where is this cold air coming from? You know well, when you sit in the winter next to a door, for example, the balcony door, and that door is not well weathered, you feel that draft, you feel that you're cold. And what do? We turn up the thermostat in order to compensate. In Passive House, this doesn't happen. You don't have cold drafts because of the air leakage quality. There is a standard in Passive House that does not allow any leakage in the building that might cause health problem, comfort problem, or even structural decay problem. Passive House standard requires that window maintain an internal surface temperature over 17 degrees Celsius. Windows that are much colder than the room temperature are also uncomfortable because we experience them as cold spots. People probably put a blanket or wrap themselves around with blanket when their couch is close to a window, especially in the nighttime. The glass behaves or acts like a radiator in reverse. The effect of this is a band of discomfort around the perimeter of the room. Again, it could also be a source of mold growth, of pollutants, of sicknesses. Passive House has no overheating. So many buildings overheat due to inadequate insulation. In many climates around the world, air conditioning simply shouldn't be needed in well-designed buildings. In Passive House, definitely you don't need a cooling system. But unfortunately, because most of the buildings are poorly designed and poorly performing, then you would think that it's only natural to have a cooling system inside. Don't forget, air conditioning emits CO2. and greenhouse gas emissions because they work around the clock, or sometimes they turn them on all summer. So they emit CO2 to the atmosphere. Now let me move on to aesthetics and character. As a matter of fact, I'd probably be the only architect who puts this as a third. You may know a passive house doesn't have a style. It's a system. It's a building construction design system. So it's a design system to ensure energy efficiency. However, and because of that, because of energy efficiency, it prefers simplicity, less decoration. So for passive house, this means no extra elements that might create thermal bridges or energy wasters, as I call them, like elements popping out or weird shapes, roofs that we see in mansions, for example. A lot of roofs, all of these roofs emits heat in the wintertime, where you mostly need to conserve heat within a very compact sort of form. So how does this relate to aesthetics and character? Well, it relates it through what we call the compaction ratio. And what is compaction ratio? It's the ratio of the area of all floors to the volume of the building. And passive house has a ratio that it recommends, it follows. But that compactness, the tendency to increase volume over the area, so that you reach that ideal proportion or ratio, creates simplicity. So in my view, simplicity is the catalyst for innovation. You have a simple form, how can you create it beautiful, attractive, full of character, full of inspiration? And in my view, the passive house provides this simplicity because you're tied with the form. You're kind of restricted with not having so many elements popping out and creating thermal bridging. That is not actually a minus, it's a plus for you as a designer or as a homeowner. You say, okay, I created that box, I created this L shape, simple L shape. How can I make it more attractive? Here comes the innovation within the architects and design world. And also some of the homeowners are very creative in that respect. The greatest of designs, they are very simple. They are rectangles or cubes. But the spirit that you put into them with this simple form can tremendously reflect your character. The fourth element, so remember we have 4 critical reasons. The fourth being super efficient. If you notice, I put that as element number 4. In a passive house, and this is a graph that, a simple primitive graph, however, but it shows you a passive house energy consumption over a low energy building. The savings are documented to be over 75%. What does that mean? That means it's energy efficient, which means it's not harmful. It's 10% or 20% less harmful than the most low energy efficient home or building. But it also reflects on the money, the expenses, the monthly expenses of energy. And notwithstanding all the other factors, the health, the comfort, the aesthetics, it actually saves you money. To sum up what we've just learned, we learned that there are 4 critical reasons why passive house is one of the most healthy, comfortable, aesthetically pleasing, and reflects your character and super efficient buildings out there. It is healthy because it provides you with fresh air all year round for the best quantity of fresh air to minimize the carbon dioxide inside the buildings and the other pollutants, for example. We also learned that passive house is quite comfortable due to not allowing high surface temperatures differentials, as we said, between the different surfaces or between the ceiling and the floor. and by not creating cold spots through using high quality windows and through not allowing for overheating. And we also learned that Passive House allows higher quality aesthetics through its simplicity, as we said. And this will eventually allow you to create a house that truly reflects who you are, your own character. You put your own imprints on it. It becomes like a canvas, a white canvas. We have also learned that the Passive House is super efficient house by default, by its name, through its rigorous measures to minimize the use of energy. I really hope that this video was useful, was informative for you to make a decision, and it got your attention. Before I let you go though, I invite you to download our free report called Project Planning Package, PPP, that will explain all the important aspects that an architect can provide you with, including aspects about Passive House, how much it costs compared to run-of-the-mill building, and our team of experts and other issues when dealing with architects. So click the link below or on the screen. Put your name and address after you clicking on the link. Provide your name, provide your best email that we can send you that project planning package, PPP, and this is free of charge. Thank you very much for watching. I wish you all the best in 2022. Together, we can make a healthier planet. Together, we make better living for everyone. In my opinion, Passive House wins.